This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and it's Halloween month, buns. Today we're going to be taking a look at a multi-part, no-sleep Reddit story entitled Butcherface. We're going to be taking a look at part 1. The plan of attack is this. I'm going to be doing part 1, and then I'm going to move on to other things this month. But if I find enough interesting stuff in this story, we'll come back to it and make this a multi-part story. Or a multi-part review. It's already a multi-part story. This was recommended to me by someone a while ago. I cannot remember who. And this was recommended to us through Undercooked Analysis, and we never got around to it. It's before we were doing Patron's Poison or anything like that. So let's get into this one and see if Butcherface is really worth your time. Fair warning, this will be long. In 1997, my friend, who we'll call Chris, moved across state. Not okay. Starting off with some spectacular grammar. Moved across state. Fuck your definite articles. At this time, we were 10. We didn't really have much of a way to see each other besides getting a ride by our parents to one or the other's house, which would be a hassle for our parents, so we eventually lost contact. During this time, I only gotten the chance to visit his house once. With this story being in this subreddit, you'd expect the house to be creepy, but it really wasn't. It was very plain. It was a very plain split-level house, probably built in the early 80s, with neighbors close by, so it wasn't even secluded. Alright, so I'm kind of two minds about this first paragraph. On one hand, we're kind of acknowledging the subreddit in a way that I don't think is positive. I know that that's the culture and everything around these stories, but it's so obvious when you're trying to separate yourself from other stories. It's he doesn't do other generic things like say I am Satan. It's his house wasn't creepy like you would expect with this being in this subreddit and all. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just a normal house no matter what. You would specify if it was a creepy house. That bothers me. On the other hand, that's a very realistic thing of you make friends when you're a child, but you're kind of at the mercy of your parents to be able to hang out with them, especially in 1997, before the advent of widespread internet. Like I said, we lost contact with each other for 10 years. That is, until Chris contacted a mutual friend through Myspace. I didn't have an account on that site. We made plans to hook up. And hang out. Netflix and chill was all the rage. We made plans to hook up and hang out. Now that we have our own means of transportation, it was a lot easier. After maybe a month of this, Chris mentioned that his family would be remodeling the house, and I offered my help. Him and his father gladly accepted the offer, since the previous owners apparently didn't keep up on it themselves. That's some weird phrasing. Didn't keep up on it themselves. Remodeling the house? They didn't do their yearly remodeling of the house? What do you mean? I know I'm kind of being nitpicky, and I don't have any, vendetta against the story. It's just got some weird things going on that I think maybe could have been proofed out first. I don't know. So, a couple weeks later, I drove down one weekend and we started tearing up carpet, ripping off wallpaper, etc. The basement had been changed into a room for Chris some years before, and while half of the floor was concrete, the other half seemed to have been torn up and replaced with floorboards, and one of the boards had become warped and broke, leaving it protruding up under the carpet, so they wanted to replace it. Okay, this is a pretty sensible setup. You have a warped floorboard and remodeling, and what kind of secrets are you going to uncover hidden in the walls and the floors of this house? That's where my mind is going. My mind is going to that House of Leaves place, but let's see what this story does. We tore the carpet up and started ripping out the floorboards when we found what looked like a hole dug about 5 feet into the ground under the floor. Chris jumped down there, thinking he could get better leverage to tear up the boards when he said something was down there. His father got a flashlight and we jumped down to check it out. It turned out to be a very worn box. It looked similar to a shoebox, but was about 3 feet long and extremely damaged by the elements. It says damaged by the elements, but I'm assuming erosion's really the only element that could get to it, because the wind, the rain, the sleet and whatnot, that can't get to it, right? It was so tattered that you wouldn't be able to pick it up in one piece. We believed that whatever was in it would just as damaged. But when we ripped it open, we noticed that whatever was in it had the added protection of a black trash bag. Chris picked up the trash bag, and its contents made the sound of plastic hitting plastic. We were curious as to what was in there, so we brought it upstairs and cut the bag open with a pair of scissors and found 24 unmarked videotapes. Me and Chris were curious as to what was on them, but his father claimed that they were most likely somebody's old bootleg collection, and if we were still curious, we could check them out later, after we were done for the day. God, this idea is so straightforward, so generic, and I'm really interested in it. I don't know what it is. I just get this weird obsession whenever it's like, oh, we find videotapes. It's so stupid, but it immediately takes me back to the opening of Marble Hornets, and I immediately get interested and intrigued, and then sometimes a story peters out from there and there's nothing interesting on the videotapes, or there's too much filler, or they don't find a good way of giving you the highlights. They don't find ways of making it interesting. But man, for some reason, it just always gets me intrigued, and I always get interested in what's happening. Since the plan was for me to stay the night and help them out the next day, and then leave that Sunday night, we decided to watch them that night. Since Chris's father was tired and didn't really care what was on the tapes, he went to bed a little bit early that night, so we pulled out their old VCR from their attic, hooked it up to the TV in Chris's room, and took one of the tapes out of the bag and slipped it in. Very plain language, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just stating it as a fact that qualitatively the story has a lot of very plain language. The tapes certainly weren't bootleg movies like Chris's father believed. They were the home movies of an unknown man we eventually began to call Butcherface. There was seemingly no flow from one scene to the next. It was like he would just film something random for what was usually just a couple of minutes, then put the camera away for God knows how long, until he found something else that interested him. Most of the footage was random footage. I want to say that again, just so you understand how poorly that rolls off the tongue. Most of the footage was random footage, like him turning on the camera, facing a chair. Like him turning on the camera, facing a chair, period. He would walk out from behind the camera to the chair, push it over onto the floor, walk back to the camera, and turn it off. Alan Resnick, is that you? Or him playing with a random spider, which he would talk to in a low, childlike voice. Then end the tape with him squashing it, or him just filming down at his feet as he walks while deeply breathing. The one thing that always stuck out about the footage is that on the few times that his face was shown, he was seen to be wearing what looked like a burlap sack tightly tied around his head with twine, with 2 eye holes cut out. He was also a big guy, being easily over 6 feet tall with a decent build, with some muscles, but not being buff. Alright, so much to tackle here. First off, the idea that they're just going to go ahead, come out and call this person Butcherface is silly. It's front-loading. You could call him just a man for now. There is a man in the videotapes, and then eventually come to call him Butcherface. Find a reason for that. But as it is right now, it's just too much, too soon, too quick. We were building up to something nice, but then you got impatient and just went ahead and called him Butcherface. The language isn't exactly the best here. Most of the footage was random footage, stuff like that. I think the image is a little too generic of the burlap sack. It's kind of aping either Jason, Friday the 13th 1 Jason, or Leatherface or something along those lines. I don't know, man. Nothing too special here. Hoping they build up something and the story takes on some atmosphere. A lot of the footage was a lot more creepy and sinister. Again, you gotta slow down. You're telling me how to feel, and you should let me feel how I feel, and if it's creepy and sinister, then you're doing your job. Some of the footage was of him videotaping people leaving buildings and houses. He was obviously hiding somewhere across the street from these locations, and he was often breathing loudly. Even worse were the things he videotaped himself doing. One piece of footage showed him shoving a glass jar up his ass. No, one piece of footage showed him sitting at a table with a rat trapped in an empty, large pickle jar. Oh man, is he going to put that pickle jar with the rat up his ass? He unscrewed the pickle jar, took out the rat, and put it up his ass. No, slowly put his hand on its head and started twisting it until it stopped screaming. He twisted a little more until the head was completely ripped off the body. Then he turned off the camera off. Another clip showed him in a barn, which there are no barns on my friend's property, so we don't know where this was filmed. He turned on the camera, showing a pig tied to a post. He walked over to the pig with an axe in his hand and hacked its head off. Oh man. Man. I could really go for some bacon. So this is an improvement because you're getting some more specific imagery. You're getting the idea of a rat in a pickle jar, but I feel like that should be built to more. We should see, like, even if it's just a few more paragraphs, put the rat in a pickle jar, and the rat is in the pickle jar, and give the rat a name. Put some, what's it called? What's the name of the masking tape? Put some masking tape on the pickle jar, and then give the rat a name. Call him Whiskers, and then, we get to know Whiskers, and we like Whiskers, and then one day, Butcherface takes Whiskers out of the jar and wrenches off his head. Then we actually, we're going on a story. This is, a few sentences. There was a pickle jar with a rat in it. We opened up the pickle jar and killed the rat. It's too quick, and it seems like it's not building to anything. I'm kind of interested, honestly, just to be real, as to where this barn is coming from. That is a question that I have. But I do, if I was just stumbling across this in the wild, I wouldn't want to continue reading this because it feels like the author isn't saving anything, that they're not trusting the intelligence of the reader to know that this is building to something. It seems like they got really impatient. But overall, I don't think that the No Sleep audience is very patient. This is done rather well on No Sleep. It's got 1,333 upvotes. Oh, and it's written by Dash 23, by the way. So bearing that in mind, this is a pretty successful thing on No Sleep. And in terms of just conceptually, it's not terrible. I think it's probably quite a bit above average, but it's just falling short in so many ways, and I feel like this is a symptom of the state of creepypasta 6 years ago and now, when this was written. What was really creepy, again, with the not trusting your own writing, telling the reader that this is creepy rather than letting them figure that out on their own. What was really creepy was that most of the footage was shot in what was now my friend's house. It was always dark in the footage, like this man didn't like having lights on. But we did recognize various locations of the house. One piece of footage was obviously shot in the living room, which showed Butcherface using a large hunting rifle to cut the power cord off of something we couldn't see, wrapping this cord tightly around his arm, grunting and moaning as he does it, and then did it, and using the knife to cut deep cuts into his hand and arm. One disturbing clip, You're saying this like you're a clickbaiting journalist, pseudo-journalist kind of deal. This disturbing man cut this cord, you won't believe what happened next. One disturbing clip showed him standing in front of a table in the kitchen. On the table was a clothes iron. He then unzipped his pants, took out his penis, put it on the table, and pressed the hot iron against it. He screamed, but didn't take it off for about 30 seconds. See, all of this is just extreme X-rated aping of Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He finally took it off, limped over to the camera, and turned it off. I'm going to draw a comparison between what's going on here, which is very much so a shotgun approach of just weird, disturbing imagery. I'm going to draw a comparison to my favorite shotgun weird imagery story, which is normal porn for normal people. In normal porn for normal people, they come up with really bizarre, weird, interesting ideas that aren't so formulaic. Things like a amputee dancing on a DDR mat, or a man in a slightly obese man in a chicken mask masturbating, but in a mirror while something else is going on, so you have to pay attention to notice that part. Here, there's no subtlety because he unzips his pants and burns his dick with a hot iron. The implication here is that this is just one, sadistic guy, sadistic guy. Is it sadism? Masochistic. There we go, Brandon. You know the terms. This one masochistic guy who likes hurting himself. Whereas in normal porn for normal people, there is an organization that is presumably making this for some sort of weird porn-related eugenics program. There's something more to grind your teeth into, you know? This is just so flaccid, much like an iron dick. What freaked us out the most was the clip of Butcherface in what used to be Chris's upstairs bedroom before he moved to the basement. Oh, so this freaked you out the most. Did it freak us out the most? Let's see. He turned on the camera and showed the whole room covered in what appeared to be hundreds of lit candles. See, they're just... man, I really feel like I'm shitting on this story, but it's just such a hodgepodge of everything, and I don't think any of it means anything. They were on every table, chair, and shelf. The walls were covered in paintings of grotesque and ghostly faces. He then walked to a corner of the room and started furiously carving something into the floor with the hunting rifle. Brandon, that's not what that says. He would stab it on the floor and drag it around, pull it out, and stab again. Since that room was vacant at the moment and used for storage, and was going to be renovated anyway, Chris's father let us tear up the carpet in that area of the room. What we found was a section of the floor that had been heavily sanded down with no real evidence of what had been carved there. Another tape showed footage of Butcherface in the same room, with even more candles. He was on his knees, facing away from the camera, with his arms in the air, screaming to be brought to the pits of pain and torture. One interesting thing about this clip is that he only had 3 fingers on his left hand, missing his pinky and ring finger. He had appeared to run out of tape, The last piece of footage on the tape showed Butcherface furiously digging a hole that we found in the basement. He was digging fast and breathing heavily. He was constantly grunting. His shirt was off, but he still had the mask on. After a couple of minutes of him just digging, period. After a couple of minutes of him just digging, period. End of thought. He just started talking. He started talking, saying something like, "This is it. This is it. They won't know. They won't find me. This is where I'll hide." Alright, so that's the ending of part 1 of Butcherface on No Sleep by -32. 32? Yes, that is the order of those numbers, Brandon. Bearing that in mind, I think I definitely need to keep reading this at some point. Not because I'm enthralled, but because this is such a mishmash of things and there's so much to talk about. This is definitely worthy of discussion. It's got a 97% upvotes on Reddit, and that is kind of frustrating because there's some grammatical errors here. There's uncapitalized I's, which I guess is okay. Yeah, I take that back. That's fine. The bigger problem, though, is that it's using violence and sexual violence in a very trivial way. It's just kind of throwaway. And it's frustrating because there's actually something hidden here, which is the idea of people discovering about their house through footage of how it used to look. But instead of taking a more subtle approach, they literally just put Leatherface in there. This is reading like a Leatherface fanfiction, and now that I'm seeing that, I can't imagine this house as not being the house from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I can't be the only one who feels that way. The VCR thing is cool. The shotgun approach to the story is cool. You could use the violence in a way that is unique, the disturbing imagery in a way that is unique, instead of doing it the straightforward way, as I've mentioned. Bearing that in mind, I don't think that the person writing the story was really writing it for me. I think that they wanted their story to be this blunt. This is very much so what is in vogue in No Sleep, and what gets successful there is something as on the nose as a story entitled Butcherface. But these are just my feeling. That's just theory, just game theory. But man, I'm excited to see what wonders part 2 and part 3 hold of Butcherface. Now, if you enjoyed that, please consider helping out the community and supporting my channel. You can support the community by conversing in the comments below, going to toospooky.com for original horror stories, and trying your hand at short horror yourself. You can support me by liking this video, following me on Twitter and Tumblr, links in the description, and checking out my art page, which is also down below. Thank you so much for your time, and now on to our sponsor at this non-moment in time, which is Lifesavers. Lifesavers. As a child, I confused them with lightsabers. That is a long story, and that is not a very good fake advertisement.